The black Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway at exactly 6:30 in the evening, right on schedule. David Chen had built his entire life on schedules, precision, and control. As the founder of a tech company worth over $200 million, he couldn't afford to be late, couldn't afford mistakes, couldn't afford to let anything slip through the cracks. But there was one thing in his life he couldn't control, couldn't fix with money or planning or sheer determination, and that one thing was waiting for him inside his mansion, in a world he couldn't quite reach. David grabbed his leather briefcase from the passenger seat and headed toward the front door. The house was quiet, as it always was. Too quiet. The kind of silence that settles into a home when joy has packed its bags and left. He loosened his tie as he walked through the marble foyer, past the sweeping staircase, past the living room that no one ever sat in because it was too formal, too perfect, too much like a museum. He called out as he always did. "I'm home." No response. But he hadn't expected one. David set his briefcase down in his office and headed upstairs. His daughter would be in her room, probably sitting in the corner by the window where she always sat, rocking slightly, staring at something only she could see. 8 years old, and he still felt like he barely knew her. 8 years of trying everything, spending everything, and still feeling like he was standing on one side of a glass wall, while she stood on the other. The doctors had given her diagnosis when she was 3. Severe autism, they said. Nonverbal, they said. She would need constant care, constant therapy, constant intervention, and David had provided it all. The best specialists money could buy, programs that cost more than most people's yearly salary, equipment, tools, special diets, weighted blankets, noise-canceling headphones. He'd turned one entire room of the house into a sensory therapy space that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Nothing had worked. Not really. His daughter Lily remained locked in her own world, and he remained locked out of it. His ex-wife had left 2 years ago. She couldn't handle it anymore, she'd said through tears. She felt like a failure as a mother. She felt like they were living in a house with a ghost. David hadn't fought for the marriage. How could he? He felt the same way, even if he'd never admitted it out loud. The divorce had been quiet, expensive, and quick. His ex-wife had moved to California and called once a month to ask about Lily. The conversations lasted maybe 5 minutes, so it was just David and Lily now. And Mrs. Martinez, the housekeeper he'd hired 6 months ago. David walked down the hallway toward Lily's room. The door was slightly open, which was unusual. Lily hated when her door was open. She would scream if anyone left it even a crack open. A high-pitched sound that would go on for hours until someone closed it properly. He'd installed a special mechanism to make sure the door always closed completely. But today the door was open, and there was sound coming from inside, not screaming, not the usual humming noise Lily made sometimes. This was different. Voices. David felt his heart speed up as he moved closer. One voice was Mrs. Martinez. He'd recognize her soft accent anywhere. But the other voice, the smaller voice, the one speaking so quietly he almost couldn't hear it, that was Lily. His daughter was speaking. David froze in the hallway, his hand halfway to the doorknob. Lily didn't speak. She'd said maybe 10 words in her entire life. Mama once when she was 2. No, a handful of times. But never sentences. Never conversations. The speech therapist had told him it might never happen. That some children with severe autism simply didn't develop verbal communication. Yet here she was, speaking. He pushed the door open slowly, not wanting to startle them. The sight that met his eyes made him forget how to breathe. Lily was sitting on the floor in the middle of her room, her legs crossed, her favorite stuffed rabbit in her lap. Mrs. Martinez was sitting across from her, also on the floor with several picture cards spread out between them. They were both smiling. When was the last time he'd seen his daughter smile? "Bonjour, Mrs. Rosa," Lily said softly, the words careful and uncertain but clear as crystal. "Très bien, pequeña," Mrs. Martinez replied, her voice warm and encouraging. "Very good. Now can you tell me what this is?" She held up a card with a picture of an apple on it. Lily looked at the card for a long moment. David could see her processing, thinking. Then she spoke again, and the words came out in a language he didn't expect. "Un pomme," Lily said. Mrs. Martinez beamed. "Perfect. You remembered. Now in Italian. Una mela." David must have made a sound because both of them looked up at once. Mrs. Martinez's smile vanished instantly. replaced with an expression of pure panic. She scrambled to her feet so quickly she almost knocked over the picture cards. "Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I know I should have asked permission first. I didn't mean to overstep. I just thought maybe, if I tried something different. I'm sorry. I should have told you. Please, I can explain." But David wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Lily, who was now looking back at him. Really looking at him. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't look away immediately. She held his gaze, and then something impossible happened. She smiled at him. "Papa," she said softly. The word hit him like a physical blow. "Papa." She'd never called him that. She'd never called him anything. Dad, Daddy, Father. Nothing. He'd been a tall figure who walked through the house, who helped her with her coat sometimes, who sat at the other end of the dinner table while she ate her carefully arranged meals, but he'd never been Papa. "Papa," Lily said again, her voice a little stronger. "Mrs. Rosa teaches me words. I like learning new words. They make my head feel better." David's briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. He barely noticed. His daughter had just spoken to him in complete sentences. His daughter, who doctors had said might never speak, had just told him she liked learning. Mrs. Martinez was still standing there, looking like she expected to be fired on the spot. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she was watching him with worried eyes. "How long?" David managed to ask. His voice came out rough, scratchy. "How long have you been doing this?" Mrs. Martinez glanced down at Lily, then back at him. "Since I started working here, Mr. Chen. About 6 months. I'm sorry. I should have asked. I noticed things about Lily that reminded me of my research, and I thought maybe I could help. I never meant to cause problems." "Your research?" David repeated. "What research?" Mrs. Martinez looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Chen, maybe we should talk about this later. When Lily is in bed?" He wanted to demand answers right now, immediately, this second. But Lily was still sitting on the floor, still looking at him with those bright, aware eyes, and he didn't want to ruin this moment. Whatever this moment was. "Okay," he said slowly. "Yes, we'll talk later. But Mrs. Martinez? Don't apologize. Whatever you're doing, whatever this is, just keep doing it." He saw the relief flood across her face. She nodded quickly. "Yes, Mr. Chen, of course." David took a step into the room, moving carefully like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. He knelt down on the floor near Lily, keeping some distance but closer than he'd been in months. "Lily," he said softly, "can you show me what you've been learning?" For a moment she just looked at him. He could see her thinking, processing. Then she reached out and picked up one of the picture cards. It showed a cat. "Cat," she said in English, then gato in Spanish, then chat in French, then something in what might have been Japanese, though David wasn't sure. 4 different languages, 4 different words for the same animal, and Lily spoke them all like it was the most natural thing in the world. David felt tears burning at the back of his eyes. He'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on therapy. He'd taken Lily to specialists in 3 different states. He'd tried every treatment, every program, every intervention that promised even the smallest improvement. And the whole time, the answer had been here in his own house, with the quiet woman he'd hired through an agency and barely spoke to, beyond giving her instructions about groceries and laundry. "That's amazing." "Lily," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "You're amazing." Lily tilted her head, studying him. Then she did something that made his heart stop completely. She scooted closer to him just a few inches, the smallest movement. But for Lily, who couldn't stand being touched, who would scream if someone came too close, those few inches might as well have been a mile. "Papa looks sad," she said quietly, "but happy sad." "Why both?" Mrs. Martinez moved closer, ready to explain, but David held up a hand. He wanted to try. He wanted to talk to his daughter, really talk to her, maybe for the first time ever. "Because I'm proud of you," he said carefully. "So proud. And I'm happy that you're learning. But I'm also sad because I didn't know you could do this. I wish I had known sooner." Lily considered this. Her fingers were fidgeting with her rabbit's ears, a sign she was thinking hard about something. "English is too loud sometimes," she finally said. "All the words push into my head at once. But French is softer. Spanish is warm. Japanese is like blocks, neat blocks. Mrs. Rosa showed me I can pick which words feel good. Then talking doesn't hurt so much. David had to look away for a moment, overwhelmed. All this time he'd thought Lily couldn't communicate. But she could. She just needed the right tools, the right approach. She needed someone who understood that her brain worked differently. Not wrong, just differently. He'd been so focused on fixing her, on making her fit into the world, that he'd never stopped to think about giving her the tools to navigate the world in her own way. When he looked back, Mrs. Martinez was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was compassion there, yes, but also something else. Understanding, maybe, like she knew exactly what he was feeling because she'd felt it before. "We should let you have your dinner, Lily," Mrs. Martinez said gently. "You worked very hard today. I'm proud of you, too." Lily nodded and picked up her rabbit, standing up in that slightly awkward way she had. But before she walked toward her bed, she looked back at David. "Will Papa eat dinner with me?" she asked. The question was so simple, so normal, the kind of thing any 8-year-old might ask. But from Lily it was extraordinary. She was asking for something she wanted. She was expressing a preference. She was inviting him into her world. "Yes," David said immediately. "Yes, I'd like that very much." Lily smiled again, that small but genuine smile, and nodded. Then she went to sit on her bed with her rabbit humming softly to herself. David stood up, his knees creaking slightly. He gestured to Mrs. Martinez and they both stepped out into the hallway, leaving Lily's door slightly open the way she apparently liked it now. "I need to understand what's happening," David said quietly. "Everything. How you did this. Why you did this. All of it." Mrs. Martinez nodded. "After dinner, Mr. Chen, I'll tell you everything. I promise." As David walked downstairs to warm up dinner, something he couldn't remember the last time he'd done, he felt different. The house felt different. The silence that usually pressed down on him felt lighter somehow, filled with possibility instead of emptiness. His daughter had spoken to him. His daughter had smiled at him. His daughter had asked to have dinner with him. And it was all because of a woman he'd barely noticed. Someone he'd thought of as just the housekeeper. Someone who cleaned his house and cooked his meals and apparently saw things in his daughter that he'd been too blind to see. Tonight, everything was going to change. He could feel it. The glass wall that had separated him from Lily for 8 years had finally cracked. And standing on the other side, holding the hammer that had broken through, was a woman with kind eyes and secrets that David suddenly desperately needed to know. Whatever Mrs. Martinez's story was, whatever had brought her to his house, whatever knowledge she had that had unlocked his daughter's voice, he was going to learn it all. And then he was going to make sure she never left. Dinner was the strangest and most wonderful meal David had eaten in years. Lily sat at the table, actually sat at the table instead of running back to her room after 3 bites. She ate her chicken slowly, methodically, the way she always did. But between bites she would look up at him and say small things, simple things. "The chicken is good. I like carrots today." Small sentences that probably seemed like nothing to other parents but felt like miracles to him. When Lily finally went to bed, still humming that soft tune to herself, David found Mrs. Martinez in the kitchen. She was washing dishes even though he'd told her 100 times that the dishwasher was right there. She always insisted on doing them by hand, said it helped her think. "Mrs. Martinez," he said from the doorway. "Please, sit down. The dishes can wait." She turned off the water and dried her hands on a towel, then followed him to the kitchen table. She sat down across from him, her posture straight but her hands nervous in her lap. She looked like someone preparing for bad news. "I'm not firing you," David said immediately because he could see the fear in her eyes. "I need you to know that first. Whatever you're about to tell me, you're not losing your job. If anything, I want to understand how you did what an army of specialists couldn't do." Mrs. Martinez let out a long breath. Some of the tension left her shoulders. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I was terrified you'd think I overstepped, that I had no right to work with Lily without permission." "Tell me how this started," David said, leaning forward. "Tell me everything." She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I noticed something about Lily on my first day here. The way she covered her ears when you spoke to her. The way she would leave the room when the television was on. At first I thought she was just sensitive to noise, which many autistic children are, but then I realized it was more specific than that. It was English that bothered her." David frowned. "What do you mean?" "English is a very complex language, Mr. Chen. The pronunciation rules are inconsistent. The same letters make different sounds depending on the word. Words that sound the same mean different things. For a brain that craves pattern and structure, English can feel chaotic, overwhelming, like static on a radio that never stops. She paused, looking down at her hands. One day, about a week after I started working here, I was cleaning Lily's room. She was in the corner, rocking and humming like she does. I wasn't thinking, I was just humming along with her. And I started singing a lullaby my mother used to sing to me. In Spanish. David watched her face as she remembered. There was something tender in her expression, something that spoke of pain and love mixed together. Lily stopped rocking, Mrs. Martinez continued. She turned and looked at me, really looked at me. Then she started humming my song, not the words, just the melody, but she had it perfect after hearing it once. So I kept singing. And when I finished, she came closer to me, closer than I'd ever seen her come to anyone. She pointed at her toy box and looked at me, waiting. She wanted you to name something, David said, starting to understand. Yes. So I said caja, which means box in Spanish, and she repeated it. Perfect pronunciation, no hesitation. Then she pointed to her bed, her window, her books. Everything in the room. And I named them all in Spanish, and she repeated every single word like she'd been speaking Spanish her whole life. Mrs. Martinez's eyes were bright now, excited. That's when I understood. It wasn't that Lily couldn't speak, Mr. Chen. It's that English hurt her brain. But Spanish, with its consistent pronunciation rules, its clear patterns, it felt safe to her. So I kept going. David felt like he was hearing about a completely different child. But she's speaking English now, too. I heard her. Yes, because I taught her that she could choose. When English feels too loud, too chaotic, she can switch to another language, one that feels better in that moment. French for some things, Spanish for others. I started teaching her Japanese because the structure is so different from European languages. The grammar is like building blocks. Very clear, very organized. Lily loves it because her brain can predict what comes next. How many languages have you taught her? Mrs. Martinez looked almost embarrassed. 5 so far. Spanish, French, Italian, Japanese, and we just started German last week. But Mr. Chen, I'm not just teaching her languages. I'm teaching her that her brain isn't wrong or broken. It's just different. And different can be beautiful. Different can be powerful. David had to look away for a moment. He'd spent 8 years thinking his daughter needed to be fixed, needed to be made normal, needed to fit into the world everyone else lived in. It had never occurred to him that maybe the world needed to fit around her instead. How do you know all this? He asked quietly. How do you know so much about autism and language? This was the question Mrs. Martinez had been dreading. He could see it in the way she stiffened, in the way her eyes dropped to the table. But she'd promised to tell him everything, and she kept her promises. Because it was my job to know, she said finally. Before I came to America, I was a professor at the University of Buenos Aires. I taught linguistics, specialized in language acquisition in neurodivergent children. I had a research lab, graduate students published papers. I spent 15 years studying how the brain processes language, especially in children whose brains work differently. David stared at her. You were a professor? A researcher? Yes. Then why are you cleaning houses? Why are you working as a housekeeper? The pain that crossed her face was sharp and immediate. She was quiet for a long moment, and David could see her deciding how much to tell him, how much to trust him with. Because my credentials mean nothing here, she said finally. When I came to America, I came with nothing but the clothes in my suitcase and my son. No time to gather documents, no time to make copies of my research, no time to do anything properly. We fled, Mr. Chen, we ran for our lives. From what? Mrs. Martinez's hands were shaking now. She clasped them together tightly. My husband and I, we were both professors. We were researching government education programs, documenting how resources were being stolen, how the money meant for children with disabilities was disappearing into corrupt officials' pockets. We were going to publish our findings. We thought we were protected by the university, by academic freedom. Her voice got quieter. We were wrong. They came for my husband first, arrested him on false charges. They ransacked our home, took all our research, all our documentation. A colleague called me, told me to run, told me they were coming for me next. I grabbed my son, grabbed whatever money we had hidden, and we left everything behind. Our home, our life, my husband. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. Your husband. Is he? He's alive, in prison. I get letters sometimes when the guards allow it. He tells me he's okay, but I know he's not. It's been 3 years, Mr. Chen. 3 years since I've seen him. 3 years since I've hugged him, talked to him face to face. My son doesn't even remember what his father's voice sounds like anymore. I'm so sorry, David said, and the words felt completely inadequate. Mrs. Martinez wiped at her eyes quickly. We made it to America. Applied for asylum. It's still pending, years later, stuck in the system. But we're here, we're safe, and that's what matters. My son is in high school now. He's doing well. He wants to study linguistics like his parents. That makes me proud. But your credentials, David said. Your research. Can't you get copies? Can't the university verify your work? She gave him a sad smile. The university has new administration now. People put in place by the same government that arrested my husband. They claim they have no record of me, no record of my research. As far as they're concerned, I never existed. And even if they admitted it, Mr. Chen, the process to get foreign credentials recognized here, it takes years. It costs money I don't have. It requires documents I can't get. So I am, as far as America is concerned, nobody. A woman with no education, no skills, no value except what I can do with a mop and a vacuum cleaner. The bitterness in her voice was sharp, and David couldn't blame her. Here was a woman who had spent her entire adult life studying how to help children like Lily, who had the knowledge and skills that could change lives, and she was scrubbing toilets because a system decided a piece of paper mattered more than what she knew. Why didn't you say something? David asked. Why didn't you tell me what you could do? Mrs. Martinez looked at him with tired eyes. Would you have believed me, Mr. Chen? If your housekeeper had told you she used to be a professor, that she could help your daughter when no one else could, would you have taken her seriously? Or would you have thought she was crazy, maybe dangerous? Would you have fired me and called the agency to complain? David wanted to say he would have believed her, but he knew the truth. 6 months ago, if Mrs. Martinez had told him this story, he probably would have smiled politely and thought she was delusional. He probably would have mentioned it to the agency, suggested they do better background checks. He probably would have found a different housekeeper, someone who stayed in their lane and didn't make up stories. You're right, he admitted. I probably wouldn't have believed you. I'm sorry for that. You don't need to apologize. I understand how the world works. People see a middle-aged woman with an accent cleaning their house. They don't see someone who used to lecture at universities. They see the maid. Just the maid. But you helped Lily anyway, David said. Even knowing I might fire you if I found out. Even knowing I might not believe you or appreciate what you were doing. You helped her anyway. Mrs. Martinez's expression softened. Of course I did. How could I not? I saw a brilliant little girl trapped inside her own head, struggling to communicate, struggling to be understood. I saw parents and doctors trying to force her to be something she couldn't be instead of meeting her where she was. I had the knowledge and the skills to help her. What kind of person would I be if I didn't at least try? David felt something crack open in his chest. This woman who had lost everything, who was living in a country that didn't recognize her worth, who was working a job so far below her abilities it was almost insulting. She had used what little power she had to help a child who wasn't even hers. She'd risked her job, risked being misunderstood, risked everything because she couldn't stand by and watch Lily struggle when she knew how to help. I want to hire you, David said suddenly, not as a housekeeper, as Lily's teacher. Her specialist, whatever title makes sense. I'll pay you what you're worth, what you should have been earning all along. And I want to help you get your credentials recognized. I'll hire lawyers, immigration specialists, whatever it takes. We'll get your husband out of prison, get him here to America. We'll fight this together. Mrs. Martinez was staring at him like he'd just spoken in a language she didn't understand. Mr. Chen, you can't. That would cost— I don't care what it costs, David interrupted. You gave me my daughter back. You gave Lily her voice. You did in 6 months what hundreds of thousands of dollars in therapy couldn't do in 8 years. Money means nothing if I can't help the people who actually matter. Please let me do this. Tears were streaming down Mrs. Martinez's face now. She tried to speak several times but couldn't get the words out. Finally, she just nodded, her hands covering her face. David felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope that came from trying another expensive treatment that probably wouldn't work. But actual hope based on real results, real progress, real connection with his daughter. We'll start tomorrow, he said gently. We'll figure out exactly what Lily needs, design a proper program, and we'll start the process of getting your life back, Mrs. Martinez, your real life, the one that was stolen from you. She looked up at him, her eyes red but her smile genuine. Rosa, she said quietly. Please call me Rosa. If we're going to work together, truly work together, it should be Rosa. Rosa, David repeated, testing the name. It felt right. More personal, more real. And you should call me David. Mr. Chen makes me feel like we're strangers, and I don't think we are anymore. Rosa laughed, a watery sound. No, I suppose we're not. They talked for another hour. Rosa pulling out a worn notebook she'd been keeping, filled with observations about Lily, notes about which languages worked best for different situations, ideas for future lessons. David listened, absorbing every word, amazed at the level of detail, the depth of thought, the genuine care that had gone into every page. When Rosa finally went home to her son, David sat alone in his kitchen, the notebook open in front of him. He flipped through the pages, reading Rosa's neat handwriting, seeing his daughter through someone else's eyes. Someone who saw potential instead of problems, someone who saw a unique mind instead of a broken one. Tomorrow, everything would change. He would cancel the appointments with specialists who hadn't helped, redirect that money towards something that actually worked. He would hire the best lawyers in the country to help Rosa. He would fight for her the way she had quietly, without asking for anything in return, fought for his daughter. But tonight, he just sat with the notebook and let himself feel something he'd almost forgotten how to feel. Gratitude. Deep, overwhelming gratitude for a woman who had seen what everyone else had missed, who had the knowledge to help and the courage to try. Even when the world told her she was nobody, Rosa Martinez wasn't nobody. She was everything, and David was going to make sure the world knew it. The next 3 months changed everything in ways David never could have imagined. The first thing he did was sit down with his lawyer, a sharp woman named Jennifer who'd handled his divorce and most of his business contracts. When he explained what he wanted to do, she'd raised an eyebrow. You want to sponsor your housekeeper's credentials, hire immigration lawyers to get her husband out of an Argentinian prison, and restructure her employment to pay her a 6-figure salary? Jennifer had asked, pen hovering over her notepad. That's exactly what I want, David had confirmed. You know this could take years, and cost you easily $500,000, maybe more. I don't care. Make it happen. Jennifer had studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right. But David, if you're going to do this, do it right. Document everything. Keep records of Lily's progress. If this woman is as good as you say, the work she's doing could help more than just your daughter. She'd been right about that part. More right than either of them knew. David converted one of the unused guest rooms into a proper learning space for Lily. Rosa helped design it, keeping everything calm and organized the way Lily's brain preferred. Soft lighting instead of harsh overhead fluorescence, muted colors on the walls, a corner with cushions where Lily could retreat if she got overwhelmed. Shelves organized with materials in different languages, each section clearly labeled with both words and pictures. The transformation in Lily was remarkable. Within the first month of working officially with Rosa, she went from speaking in short, uncertain sentences to having actual conversations. She still switched between languages, sometimes in the middle of a sentence, but Rosa had taught David what each switch meant. When Lily switched to Spanish, she was feeling comfortable and safe. French meant she was trying to express something emotional. Japanese meant she was thinking through a problem logically. German meant she was excited about something structured like math or patterns. It was like learning to understand his daughter for the first time in 8 years. One morning, David was working from home, trying to focus on emails, when Lily appeared in his office doorway. She was holding a book, one of the picture dictionaries Rosa used with her. Papa, she said, then corrected herself. Sorry, Father. Rosa says you're working, and I should say Father when it's serious. David closed his laptop immediately. You can call me Papa, sweetheart, always. What's up? Lily came into the room, moving less awkwardly than she used to. Rosa had been working with her on that too, helping her understand her body's movement in space. I made something. Rosa helped me. I want to show you. She opened the book to a page she'd marked with a sticky note. There, in careful handwriting that was clearly Lily's, was a list. At the top it said things I love in English. Below that were items written in different languages. Los libros, Lily read, pointing to the first one. That's books in Spanish. I love books because they have patterns and stories. Le chocolat, she continued. Chocolate in French. I love it because it makes me feel warm inside. My stuffed rabbit, she said in English. I love him because he's been with me always. There were more items. Music, her window seat, drawing, Rosa, and at the bottom, written in slightly shakier letters as if she'd been nervous to write it. Papa. David's throat tightened. Lily, this is beautiful. Rosa says it's good to tell people when you love them, Lily said, looking at her feet. Because sometimes people don't know, and not knowing makes them sad. I don't want you to be sad, Papa. He got up from his desk and knelt down so he was at her eye level. Can I hug you, Lily? You can say no if you don't want to. That was another thing Rosa had taught him. Always ask. Always let Lily have control over her own body, her own space. Don't assume that because she was his daughter, he had the right to touch her whenever he wanted. Lily thought about it. That little crease appearing between her eyebrows the way it did when she was processing something difficult. Then she nodded. Yes, but gentle. Not too tight. David wrapped his arms around his daughter carefully, and for the first time in years she didn't stiffen or pull away. She leaned into him just slightly, and he felt her small arms come up to hug him back. I love you too, Lily, he whispered. So much. More than anything in the world. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I know, Papa. Rosa told me you show love by making sure I have everything I need. She says some people show love with words and some people show love with actions. You show it with actions. That's okay too. After Lily went back to her learning room with Rosa, David sat at his desk and cried. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when something broken inside you finally starts to heal. His daughter knew he loved her. His daughter, who he'd thought might never understand emotional concepts, who he'd worried would never connect with other people. She understood. She understood him. Rosa's approach wasn't just teaching Lily languages. It was teaching her to understand the world, to navigate relationships, to recognize and express feelings. It was everything the expensive therapist had tried to do. But it worked because Rosa met Lily where she was instead of trying to force her to be somewhere else. Word started to spread, the way word always does in communities of parents dealing with the same struggles. David had mentioned Lily's progress to another parent at a support group he used to attend, back when he was still desperately searching for answers. That parent told another parent who told another. Soon, David's phone was ringing with calls from people he barely knew, all asking the same thing. Could Rosa help their child too? At first, David was protective, almost possessive. Rosa was Lily's teacher. They just started making progress. He didn't want to share her, didn't want to dilute her attention, didn't want anything to disrupt what was working. But Rosa had different thoughts. David, she said one evening after Lily was asleep. They'd gotten into the habit of debriefing at the end of each day, sitting at the kitchen table with tea, talking about what worked and what didn't. I got another call today. A mother whose son is 11, nonverbal, struggling. She was crying on the phone, begging me to at least talk to her, to give her advice. And what did you tell her? I told her I'd call her back. But David, I think we need to talk about this. There are so many children out there like Lily. So many parents who are desperate, who've tried everything, who are watching their children suffer and don't know how to help. If what we're doing works, if it really works, don't we have an obligation to share it? David understood what she was saying. He did. But the thought of anything disrupting what they had scared him. Lily needs you. She's doing so well, but she still needs consistent support. I know. And she'll keep getting it. But David, I could consult with other families. An hour here, an hour there. Help them understand their children the way I helped you understand Lily. Train other people in these methods. We could help so many more children. She was right. David knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and being okay with it emotionally were two different things. Rosa seemed to read his mind. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand, a gesture that had become comfortable between them over the past months. Lily will always be my priority. You have my word on that. But imagine if we could help 10 children, 20, 100. Imagine how many families could have what you and Lily have now. David thought about that mother who'd called, crying on the phone. He thought about how he'd felt before Rosa came into their lives. That helpless desperation, that feeling of failing his child every single day. He thought about all the parents out there feeling that same way right now. Okay, he said finally, but we do this carefully. We hire people to help with the house so you're not exhausted. We set boundaries so you don't burn out. And we document everything so we can show that these methods actually work." Rosa's face lit up. "Thank you, David. Thank you for trusting me with this." Over the next 2 months, Rosa started consulting with 5 other families. She'd spend a few hours each week observing their children, talking to the parents, designing individualized approaches. Not every child responded to multiple languages the way Lily had. Some needed different interventions, different strategies. But Rosa's fundamental approach, meeting the child where they were, understanding how their specific brain worked, rather than trying to force them into a standard model, that part worked across the board. David saw changes in Rosa too. She stood taller, smiled more. There was a confidence in her voice that hadn't been there before, like she was remembering who she used to be, reclaiming the parts of herself that had been buried under survival and fear and hiding. The lawyers were making progress too, though slower than David wanted. They'd filed all the paperwork to get Rosa's credentials recognized, but it was stuck in bureaucratic red tape. The immigration lawyers were working on her husband's case, but dealing with a foreign government's prison system was complicated and frustrating. Still, there was movement, progress, hope. One Saturday afternoon, Rosa's son came to the house for the first time. His name was Miguel, 16 years old, tall and lanky with his mother's kind eyes and his father's serious expression in old photos Rosa had shown David. He'd been nervous about meeting David, Rosa had warned him. Nervous about this rich man who'd suddenly inserted himself into their lives. But Lily had been excited. She'd been practicing what to say, switching between English and Spanish, preparing for someone new. When Miguel arrived, Lily surprised everyone by walking right up to him and saying in Spanish, "Hello, I'm Lily. Your mother is teaching me to speak. She's very smart. You must be proud of her." Miguel had looked stunned, then delighted. He knelt down to Lily's level, responding in Spanish. "I am proud of her. She's the smartest person I know. It's nice to meet you, Lily." They'd spent the afternoon in the backyard, Miguel patient and gentle with Lily, letting her show him her favorite spots, listening to her switch between languages, treating her like she was just a regular kid and not some fragile thing that might break. David watched from the kitchen window. Seeing Rosa watch her son with such love and pride, it made his chest ache. "He's a good kid," David said quietly. "He's the best kid," Rosa replied, her voice thick with emotion. "He's been through so much. Leaving his home, his friends, his father, living in a tiny apartment, watching me work jobs I was overqualified for, never complaining. And now he sees me doing this, being myself again, and David, the way he looks at me, like he's seeing his real mother for the first time in 3 years. He's always seen his real mother," David said, "but I'm glad you get to see yourself again too." That night, after Rosa and Miguel had gone home, after Lily was asleep clutching her rabbit, David sat in his office going through emails. There was one from Jennifer, his lawyer, with the subject line "Media Inquiry." He opened it with a frown. A local parenting blogger had somehow heard about Lily's progress and Rosa's unconventional methods. She wanted to interview them, write an article. Jennifer's email was cautious. This could be good publicity for Rosa's eventual credential recognition. Could also be a can of worms. "Your call." David stared at the email for a long time. Part of him wanted to say no, to keep their little bubble private and protected, but he thought about Rosa's words, about how many children could be helped if people knew these methods existed, about how many families were suffering right now because they didn't know there was another way. He thought about the mother who'd called Rosa crying, about the 5 families Rosa was already helping, about Miguel's face when he saw his mother being herself again, and he thought about Lily, who 3 months ago couldn't tell him she loved him, and tonight had fallen asleep with a smile on her face after playing with a new friend. Sometimes the right thing and the scary thing were the same thing. David hit reply and typed, "Set up the interview. Let's tell the story." He had no idea that clicking send on that email would change everything, that within weeks their quiet success story would explode into something much bigger, much more complicated, and much more dangerous than he could have imagined. But tonight, he didn't know that yet. Tonight he just felt grateful. Grateful for a woman who'd seen his daughter when no one else could. Grateful for the second chance he'd been given to really know Lily. Grateful for whatever strange luck had brought Rosa Martinez into their lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, David Chen went to bed feeling like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The article came out on a Tuesday morning. David had read the draft beforehand, approved it, thought it was a nice piece about unconventional approaches to autism therapy. The writer had been respectful, had interviewed Rosa extensively, had even talked to Lily in the way Rosa had coached her, letting Lily switch languages freely and not pressuring her. The headline read, "Former professor turned housekeeper revolutionizes autism treatment through multilingual approach." It was a good article. Honest, well-researched, touching. By noon, it had been shared 3,000 times. By dinner, it was trending on social media. By the next morning, David's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Most of the calls were positive. Parents desperate for help, teachers interested in the methods, other researchers wanting to collaborate. David's assistant, an efficient woman named Carol, had to create a spreadsheet just to track all the inquiries, but not everyone was happy about the attention. Dr. Patricia Brennan had been Lily's developmental therapist for 2 years, from when Lily was 4 until just after Rosa started working with her. She was a prominent figure in the autism community, ran a practice with 12 therapists on staff, and charged $400 an hour for her services. David had paid her practice nearly $60,000 over those 2 years, and Lily had made minimal progress. 3 days after the article published, David got a call from Jennifer, his lawyer. Her voice was tight, professional in that way that meant trouble. "David, we need to talk. In person. Can you come to my office?" An hour later, David sat across from Jennifer's desk while she slid a stack of papers toward him. "Dr. Brennan has filed complaints with the State Medical Board and Child Protective Services. She's claiming that Rosa is practicing therapy without a license and that you're endangering Lily by allowing an unqualified person to treat her." David felt like he'd been punched. That's insane. Rosa isn't practicing therapy. She's teaching. She's an educator, and she has more qualifications than Brennan ever did. Qualifications that aren't recognized in this country. Jennifer reminded him gently. That's the problem. Legally, Rosa is a housekeeper with no credentials. On paper, this looks like you fired a licensed therapist and replaced her with someone who has no right to be working with special needs children. But Lily's progress is documented. We have everything recorded. The improvements are undeniable, I know, and that's our defense. But David, there's more. Jennifer pulled out another paper. Someone also reported this to Immigration Services. Anonymous tip, claiming that Rosa might be working illegally, that you might be exploiting an undocumented worker. Rosa has a work permit. She applied for asylum. Everything's legal. I know that too. But these complaints trigger investigations, mandatory investigations, which means social workers coming to evaluate Lily, immigration officers reviewing Rosa's status, medical board investigators looking into whether therapeutic services were provided without proper licensing. This is going to get messy. David's hands clenched into fists. This is Brennan punishing us because Rosa succeeded where she failed. This is about ego and money, not about what's best for Lily. Probably, Jennifer agreed, but we still have to deal with it properly. And David? There's something else you need to know. The article mentioned Rosa's husband, how he's imprisoned in Argentina. Some people online are claiming Rosa might be a security risk, that her husband might be an actual criminal, that you're being naive. That's garbage. Her husband was arrested for exposing corruption. I believe you, but public opinion doesn't always care about facts, especially when a story involves an immigrant, a child, and a wealthy man. People are starting to create narratives that fit their existing biases. David drove home feeling sick. This was supposed to help other families, supposed to share what worked, supposed to make something good bigger. Instead, it had painted a target on Rosa's back and potentially put Lily at risk. When he got home, Rosa was in the learning room with Lily, working on a math game they'd created using 3 different languages for the numbers. Lily was laughing, counting in Japanese, then switching to Italian when she got excited about solving a problem. She looked happy, healthy, thriving. David waited until their session was done before asking Rosa to talk. They sat in his office, door closed, and he explained everything as gently as he could. He watched the color drain from Rosa's face. "I should leave," she said immediately. I should stop working with Lily before this gets worse. Before they deport me. Before they take Miguel away. Before I ruin everything you've built for your daughter. No, David said firmly. Absolutely not. We're not running from this. We're going to fight it. David, you don't understand what it's like. I'm already vulnerable. My asylum case is pending. One wrong move and they can send me back to Argentina. Back to a country where the government wants to silence me. And Miguel, he'd have to go too, or he'd be here alone. I can't risk that. Then we make sure there's no risk, David insisted. We document everything perfectly. We bring in independent evaluators. We show that what you're doing isn't therapy, it's education. We prove that Lily is better off now than she ever was with traditional treatment. Rosa shook her head, tears in her eyes. You're being naive. The system doesn't care about what works. It cares about following rules, checking boxes, protecting itself. I'm an immigrant with no recognized credentials working with a vulnerable child. That's the story they'll tell. And it doesn't matter how much progress Lily has made. So we change the story. David said. We show them who you really are. We get your credentials recognized faster. We bring in experts who can vouch for your methods. We fight, Rosa, we don't give up. The first social worker came 2 days later. Her name was Helen, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd probably seen every kind of family situation imaginable. She interviewed David, asking pointed questions about why he'd stopped traditional therapy, what qualifications Rosa had, whether Lily was being exploited or used as an experiment. Then she interviewed Lily. David and Rosa watched through a window, not allowed in the room, both of them tense and anxious. Lily didn't like strangers. New people overwhelmed her. This could go badly, but Lily surprised them again. When Helen asked her questions in English, Lily answered in whichever language felt right for the answer. When Helen looked confused, Lily patiently explained in English that her brain liked different languages for different things. She showed Helen her notebooks, her learning materials, told her about her friend Miguel, about the other children Rosa was helping. Are you happy? Helen asked at one point. Lily thought about it, that careful consideration she always gave to important questions. Then she said in clear English, yes. I used to be sad all the time because I couldn't make the words work. Now I can make words work in 5 languages. Rosa taught me that my brain is special, not broken. Papa is happy too now. We weren't happy before. When Helen came out of the interview room, her expression was unreadable. I'll need to observe more sessions. Talk to Rosa extensively. Review all documentation of Lily's progress and methods used. This investigation will take several weeks at minimum. But you can see Lily's doing well, David said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. Helen's expression softened slightly. Mr. Chen, I can see that your daughter is articulate, engaged, and seems content. But my job isn't to judge whether she's doing well by your standards. It's to determine whether she's receiving appropriate care according to state guidelines. Those are 2 different things. After Helen left, Rosa sat on the couch with her head in her hands. This is what I was afraid of. Lily is thriving, and they still might decide what we're doing is wrong because it doesn't fit their rules. David sat beside her, feeling helpless. He was used to solving problems with money, with lawyers, with sheer force of will. But this was different. This was a system that moved slowly, that valued procedure over